Coogs House. All right. Good news from the move into the Big 12, at least for the University of Houston, that is, or at least I think it's good news.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who came to stop by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way we can get the latest on the Cougs into your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the Everydayer and the YouTube watcher. It is good to see you both again. I will say, as we are approaching 1250, right? We're about 1,050. So the next big giveaway is at 1250 because we're doing a giveaway every 250 subscribers, right? It looks like we're going to get there relatively soon. Anyway, the giveaway we're doing there is I think we're going to give away some Locked On Cougs merch. See the hat I got on? Like maybe some Locked On Cougs merch. Yeah, it's got a little Locked On the side. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, maybe giving something like that away when we get to 1250. So make sure you subscribe to get us there, and then to be entered in, you got to be liking and commenting. If after talking some about Houston moving into the Big 12 and a bunch of things having to do with next football season in the Big 12 and some good news, I think, out of the University of Houston today, you don't have anything else left to say, or for whatever reason you're nostalgic about the Southwest Conference days or something, tell us in the comments below, what kind of milk do you drink? We're a 2% family here, but I think that's kind of controversial someplace. Anyway, so today's episode, I want to do a couple things. One, I want to talk about the ticket sales news. That is good news, I think. And the second thing, I want to talk to someone about why it might not be, or maybe it is, or we'll see. And then the last segment, I want to talk through, I'm not a salesperson. I don't do sales. Again, teacher and coach. But I do want to sell a little bit about why each of these home games is worth having a ticket to in the quickest sales pitch possible. So before we get too far, I do want to give two quick shout outs in this episode. First, the women's tennis is moving on to the AAC quarterfinals. They beat East Carolina in the first round. They play Central Florida in the quarterfinals. So go win the conference on our way out, ladies. And the second shout out is, we've been talking about needing offensive linemen at the University of Houston this week. The Everydayer remembers, but just a couple days we talked about the offensive line needs and transfer portal. And yesterday we talked about how great the defense has been looking in their transfer portal additions. Lindell Hudson from, I believe, FIU is on campus. Obviously, Shamar Habdi-Lee is already from FIU and enrolled at University of Houston. So hopefully there's some good sales pitch happening there. Need to continue to add more big fellas, and Lindell Hudson's a good one too. So, go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it, dude. If you're listening, just go ahead, tweet it out. Say you're coming. And frankly, say it's because of Locked On Cougs. All right. So the big news that I think, at least in this first segment, is good news is that on Wednesday, the university announced that they had 5,000 new season ticket holders in 2023, assumingly in anticipation of the Big 12 football season. That puts them at over 15,000 season ticket sales at this point, which for 2 months in would be a TDECU record, which means since 2014, but that's also the stadium they play in, right? That's important to note because that's for this point in the process that obviously is not where things will end. They anticipate selling a decent amount more between now and the end of August. For reference, the most season tickets ever sold leading into a season at any, up to the game day, I guess, would be in 2016 when they sold 23,400. That was a lot higher than the next highest. In 2017, the next season, they sold 18,600 for what it's worth, 16,620. 18 and 14,800 2019. Those are the top five. So 2016, big season, obviously, as far as anticipation as well. And so the season ticket sales were up there. Worth pointing out that these are season ticket sales that are also more expensive. Moving into the Big 12 means a better on the field product, means you're playing better competition, and thus means you're paying a little bit more for it. The season tickets are up 14% in cost for the 6-game package. I say that because Houston is technically playing 7 home games, and you do have to pay extra for that game against Texas. Houston's playing 6 home games, and they have the 7th home game against Texas, and you have to pay a little bit extra for that one. That game is a 30% bump from the average home game as well. Take your guesses as to why that is. It's very front of mind, obviously, thinking about ticket sales for me. But it's worth pointing out that it's a season ticket package that includes that is an extra home game that most people don't get. B, the university fought really, really hard. Right, we talked about this months ago. Fought really, really hard to have that as a true home game and not a neutral site game at NRG. And also, bluntly, this is probably the only shot Houston has at playing UT Austin in a conference game. I guess you could theoretically meet in a bowl matchup later, but there's one football game this season. UT Austin's moving to the SEC the season after, and who knows what college football looks like the next time conferences realign. I mean, sure, you could argue with me, it may be worth talking about one day, I guess. Does Houston move into the SEC in 5 or 6 or 8 years and see them all over again? Maybe. Or perhaps college football is completely different, and there's like a complete separation from these traditional NCAA models or whatever, right? All that aside, it is a conference game versus UT Austin. It's a big-time rivalry, at least at your water coolers and coffee pots. And so it's a big-time rivalry in the ticket sales as well. Worth pointing out, though, that is just a little bit different sized package. They're counting things with the 6-game package as a more traditional, because that's what every team gets, 6 home games. Also, when looking at this, they are, again, they've sold over 15,000 season ticket packages, but TDECU Stadium seats 40,000 with Big 12 money and revenue. They are planning to expand it in the near future up to 60,000. And I think it's interesting that it seats 40,000 now, as is, and the 60,000 will be fun, and that'll be, frankly, very big for Big 12. Get into that in a moment. But as it seats 40,000 now, in 2016, once you include things like standing room only, they actually, in the Louisville game against Lamar Jackson, hit 42,822 people walking into the stadium with either general admission, standing room only type tickets. That's big time. That also proves that when Houston is good and playing good opponents, the people show up. That was obviously a big time win to knock off number 3 Louisville, and Lamar Jackson would go on to have an MVP NFL career and all the big things. But big time win there in Houston in that 2016 season. Again, that was a really good football team that probably lost a couple more games than it should have, but same kind of excitement in that one. For what it's worth, when looking at all of the top 20 games to happen at TDECU in terms of attendance, none of them have happened in the Dana Holgorsen era. That means none of the 5 home wins from the 12-2 season in 2021 made it. Now, admittedly, that was like coming out of the pandemic, and it was unsure what the season would look like ahead of time or whatever. But even in season, there was no game from 2021 that made it into the top 20 games Houston has had in terms of attendance, which is an interesting thought for what has been an offensively explosive team. And I kind of want to tie that into the second segment about, like, is this season ticket sales a good sign, or is it actually a more dubious one? But first, I want to talk a little bit about Built Bar, because something exciting is coming to Built on April 22nd. I don't have all the details yet, but the excitement is real, and it's something you won't want to miss. If you know how Built works, they have the most incredible protein bars in the world, and they do these amazing flavor jobs with unreal flavors in limited quantity. So mark your calendars and head to built.com on Saturday, April 22nd, to be one of the first to discover what all the hype is about. I can't wait to see what this new flavor is. Make sure to use promo code LOCKEDON15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Remember, these mystery box kind of things could be anything. It could even be a boat. Now, I will say I'm excited about this, and I have my own thoughts. If you've got your own thoughts, tell us in the comment section down below what your guess at a potential mystery flavor would be if you're a Built fan. I'm excited about that one though. So I am reading copy, but I'm excited here. I think this is gonna be a fun one. April 22nd. That's just this weekend. Get ready for it. All right. So I said in the first segment that doing well, season ticket sales, ahead of schedule, best it's ever been, right? And I think it's easy to read that in an excited voice, and it's easy to see a bunch of different news outlets put that out as positive news on Wednesday. I mean, this is the best it's ever been, right? They've got 5,000 new people will be season ticket holders next season just because theoretically they're wanting to see the Big 12 product. That's the whole thing you're trying to see, not just in pulling in TV rights money, but you're also looking at pulling in like a whole host of new daily fans to the product you're putting on the field, the football games. Now, I have to say though, I'm a little worried about how that stacks up with the new level of competition, in part because in the 14-team Big 12, the average stadium size, once you do all of them put together and then divide by the 14, because there's currently going to be 14 teams in the Big 12, it'll make sense later, is 57,346 people in a stadium. That is notably larger than the current 40,000 people at TDCU. And frankly, even when you overfill it with the 42,000 it was for the Lamar Jackson game, you're nowhere close to that, right? I will say that the eventual 60,000 person stadium will be bigger than that. And that's part of the reason that Dana has pushed for bigger facilities, because the average stadium right now in the Big 12 is 57,000. So being 60 will be just over by a little bit, right? Now, I will say that I wanted to adjust the math a little bit because I thought that seemed high. And I don't mean to say that like it's unattainable. Houston will get there with the 60,000 person edition, but the 57,000 seems a little high. And so then if you rework the math and pull out the soon to be leaving UT Austin and Oklahoma as they're heading off the SEC in a year, scared of Houston or whatever, I guess, the number drops significantly because UT Austin has a stadium that seats over 100,000 and Oklahoma seats over 86,000. Now, and Houston does not have to go play at those places in a conference game ever. Oklahoma is not on the schedule. UT Austin comes to Houston, right? So not exactly like some big tough road game in any sense. But if you look at the average Big 12 stadium without those two, just the 12 that will be in the conference that we know of in 2024, the average drops down to just over 45,000. So still bigger than the current 40, but notably smaller than the 60 after the expansion in addition to the stadium. So I think that's actually a good thing for Houston, because that means once they have built on the addition, they'll be comfortably in the top half of the conference as far as like stadium seating or availability, right? Now it's worth pointing out that like I'd imagine Texas Tech continues to add seats, and I imagine Baylor continues to add expansions, and I'd imagine there's got to be Boonty Pickens money at Oklahoma State somewhere, and they'll keep adding expansions, right? I don't think these things stay stagnant, and I don't expect Houston to either. But I think that's an interesting look, is that Houston is still, even when you pull out Oklahoma and Texas, at max capacity, smaller than the average stadium. And that's why we're doing these expansions. Where I get worried, though, because that's max capacity, but Houston's got 15,000 season ticket holders, and we're looking to get up over closer or above the 25,000 mark. I mean, if we got to 30, that'd be wild. That's 3/4 the stadium full just on the season tickets alone. Even, on the more common games, though, is season ticket sales are one thing. How many people show up to the games? And I remember this tweet, so I had to go back and look it up. But the Big 12 as a conference clapped back at the Pac-12 shortly before the announcement that Houston, these places, people would be adding or being added to the Big 12. And someone tweeted out about like, oh, no one's going to watch any Big 12 football once Texas and Oklahoma are gone. And it was a Pac-12 fan talking about how they had great attendance and it was this better conference and blah, 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 blah. Now, fast forward to now, we know that's bogus. But back in what was this tweet? Back in 2020 or August of 2022, I guess that might have felt a little bit different. I guess this was actually after the announcement, but the 8 carryover member schools, meaning the ones that have been in the Big 12, and I'm being a little wordy, I'm sorry, but Baylor, Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia, Texas Tech, Kansas, the 8 that are currently in the Big 12 that will still be in the Big 12, all have higher average attendance by percentage than the vast majority of the Pac-12. And that was the clapback the Big 12 was trying to get out in this picture here, this graphic based on 2019 data from pre-COVID levels, right? And I think that's, obviously things have changed a little bit since then as far as who goes to games and how. Long story short, the part of this that worried me is that in looking at that, first of all, Baylor's average attendance is over 100%. So yes, you could point out that they only seat 45,000 in that stadium right there on the river in Waco, and say what you want about Waco, but it's a fairly new stadium. But they're averaging a sellout and then some. That's a lot, right? That 2019, obviously, but they're a different football team, but that's a lot, right? Kansas State, right? Pretty strong football team. Manhattan, Kansas. Probably not a whole lot of other things to do on Saturday. They're averaging almost 98% average attendance to football games. Iowa State, right? 97% average attendance. Oklahoma State, 96% average attendance, right? Even all the way down to Texas Tech at 88.36% average attendance in 2019. That means these things are full, right? So while their stadium size might be comparable once you take out Texas and Oklahoma, the average stadium is much more full than TDECU has been. For reference, 7 of the 8 carryover schools have over 88% attendance in 2019, right? In the entire existence of TDECU, over 88% full has only happened 13 times. Now, that's technically 9 seasons, although one of them was the COVID year where it was like an average of like 8,000 people. So take that year out. It's still 8 seasons, right? And just 13 games have had over 88% attendance. I think that's kind of weak. And I don't mean to say like that worries me going in, because if we want to get to the 88% attendance, that feels like kind of what everyone in the Big 12 or the like current Big 12 has. That's going to be something that we have not like. That's a lot. Not only has that not happened in the Daniel Holgorsen era, there's not been a game with 88% attendance, but it also is like you're talking 36,000 people very, very quickly. Because you're trying to get an average attendance of 88%. For what it's worth, Kansas was the 8th school at 67%. 67% even would be most of the top 20 games to happen in terms of attendance at TDECU, right? So Houston, we need to continue to show up. We need to continue to show out. And frankly, go to the games, right? Go to tailgate before, have a good time, be responsible, have a good driver, but go to the games. What's interesting here is that Houston is moving into this ballpark, into this ball game, I should say, that is the Big 12. And I think that the growth is anticipated, worth celebrating, and also not enough yet. And I think that's a weird combination of all of the things. And so in the third segment, I kind of want to talk through the 7 2023 home games and tell you from least fun to most fun why you need to buy a ticket to that game. And hopefully by the end of listening to all 7, you're like, okay, I'm buying all the season tickets. And then we all flood, and however many people are listening to this, I know you, though, will listen to this and then go buy a season ticket package as well, because it's going to be a great show. So let's get to that in the third segment, which starts right now. All right, so the least entertaining game, I guess, would be the Sam Houston State home game. In that is a non-conference game. It is a very, weak opponent relative to the rest of the schedule. But reasons to go to this game are that it is still Cougar football. Like at the end of the day, you're watching Cougar football in person. It should be a win. Should be. I say should be because obviously college football is weird. Anything can happen, but that should be fun. You should see some celebrations, see some touchdowns, see some sacks, see some turnovers forced by the Houston defense, right? The other aspect of this is the fourth game of the season. The third game is TCU. Now, if they win that TCU game, the energy in the stadium to go 4-0 versus Sam Houston State will be wild. So I anticipate if they can manage to pull off what will be a Vegas upset against TCU, you're looking at a crazy crowd talking about we're in here, we belong, we're in the Big 12, we're taking over, H-Town takeover all over again, all those things, all that bubbling up, like that energy will be flowing through what ought to be a fun Cougar win. I do think that one could be fun, but it's only the seventh most fun home game I would anticipate. The sixth one, I would say, is UT San Antonio. It is the first game of the season. It's still a non-conference game, though. So, it's a common opponent. We played them before. But unlike my opinions of San Houston State, so they'll probably flip around and prove me wrong, UTSA is a very good football team, a well-coached football team, and frankly, a team that pushed Houston kind of to the brink a season ago. Now, admittedly, I think UTSA punches above their weight class a lot right now, and so it's worth pointing out that they probably do the same again next year. Also, for people that are tired of Dana, he's got his pros, he's got his cons. We have lots of offseason to dissect those. If you're not a Dana person, you might want to pay attention to that coach on the UTSA sideline. He's a very, very highly qualified coach that enjoys the state of Texas and will probably be offered jobs at bigger programs than UTSA in the very near future. I'm not saying any of those are Houston necessarily. I am saying that that's a name and a face you may want to keep your eyes on, so be staring at it on the other sideline if something is going south in that game. All right, that's the sixth most fun game. The fifth most fun game of the home games to look at for me is Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati is a common conference opponent in the sense that they're moving into the Big 12 from the American Athletic Conference, just like Houston. That's why they're the least fun of my Big 12 games. But it's a competitive, winnable game for sure. It's a game that brings back the vibes of the 2021 American Athletic Conference Championship game, right? Like Houston really wanted to come in and knock off the Giant because Cincinnati was building quite a resume to go to the college football playoff that year. Right? Would be nice to avenge that loss in our first season in the Big 12. I also think that there's something about being a winnable game. It is a good November game, so it could be good weather, cool down some. You're not sitting out there 105 degrees baking, knock on wood, theoretically, I guess. I think that's a fun one. I also think as two teams that know each other, I feel like you're going to get more competitive atmosphere in that one from fan bases and stuff like that too. A fun Big 12 game, but it's not it's another team like Houston coming in from the American. So it's not the same, elevation of a new opponent. The other aspect of it is that frankly, we don't, even in the American, we didn't get to play them every single year, right? They weren't an every year opponent in the American. So take that as you may. My fourth most fun game of the home slate from next season is Oklahoma State, because I think that is a very winnable game. Oklahoma State's kind of up and down, and Jeff Gundy is a grown man and he's over 40 at this point. But I think that the big deal to me here is this is a winnable game. It's the last home game of the season. It's a true, Oklahoma State's a Big 12 team, Big 12 team, Big 12 team by every measure of every kind. Late November, good weather theoretically, and frankly, if you're a season ticket holder, all of those things would leave, you hope, a good taste in your mouth leaving the season on what I think could be a very high note. Now, I say could be because it's college football, nothing's guaranteed. I said could be about San Jose State, I guess, technically, right? But again, it's the fourth most fun of the home games, and I think they're very talented opponents. It is a game that I would imagine makes it on ESPN in the afternoon on that Saturday. Fun time. And again, a game I think Houston can win, and unless something breaks in a way I don't understand. I mean, Oklahoma State lost their quarterback, was very middle of the pack for the Big 12 last year. I I have good hopes about that one. Okay, the third most fun home game for next season, though, the third reason you need to buy tickets is the West Virginia game. Now, this game is a Thursday, which is both good and bad to me. Thursday night games are utter chaos. I don't know what it is about Thursday night ESPN. I mean, you remember Thursday night games for the American Athletic Conference for Houston ESPN, but those games can be nuts. And for the U of H, it's a Thursday night game that is actually not a short week, but a really long week because Houston has a bye the week before. So you think that should be a week that they put out a good product on the field. Also worth pointing out that the benefit of this is that they kind of have like, instead of like a 2-week bye or 2 weeks to get ready for one team, like a week and a half, and then because it's Thursday, they can start their process early and have another week and a half after. It's a nice schedule. But the big storylines with Houston and West Virginia will not be the Thursday night chaos as much as that will be fun for the home fans, which is why you should go. The storylines will be Dana Holgorsen versus West Virginia, right? Because Dana had just one losing season, or just one like bad season while he was at West Virginia. It was coming off of a pretty good one too. He had a fairly, like almost 600 win percentage while he was at West Virginia, and they and he kind of mutually, I guess depending on what report you're reading, moved on. He comes to Houston. He had been here at the OC before, whatever. Now he's right back in the Big 12, getting to see West Virginia all over again. There's something going on there. There's also a number of West Virginia transfers on the roster here at Houston. A lot of fun rivalry stories to go on there. And I could see Dana being the personality he is, having a little bit extra stuff in the tank for that one. I could also see that being the kind of game that, at least in the Dana Holgorsen era for Houston, becomes somewhat of a rivalry because of the Dana Holgorsen storylines. So mark down that one as the third most fun game to see. It's also, if you can get off of work or school on Friday, a fun going to a college football game on a Thursday night and like the chaos that rings out when you're the game on national TV and fun thing. Okay. TCU is my second most fun reason to buy, or most fun game to buy tickets to next season for. It is the first Big 12 game with Houston as a member of the Big 12 in TDECU. TCU is coming off of a national title game appearance. Obviously, the roster's turned over some, but they've had a heck of a time in the transfer portal as well. Talented opponent and quite a litmus test for Houston moving into the Big 12, third week of the season, right? Like high hopes, right? You're theoretically coming off a couple wins, feeling good about yourself. Let's get after this kind of thing, right? The other aspect of this is Sonny Dykes, the current TCU coach, the coach with them last year in the national championship game, has his own rivalry days with Houston when he was the coach at SMU, right? So he and Dana will have some, understanding of one another from their times coaching against each other in that rivalry. I could also see a world where, like 5 or 6 years from now, Houston and TCU representing the DFW area become some sort of an I-45 rivalry. Now, TCU and Fort Worth is a little bit different culturally than SMU and Dallas, but you catch my drift there. I also think the fun thing about this one will be if Houston, because it's so early in the season, if Houston even looks good. And I think we'll break this down in the course of the summer and whatnot, but there are paths to victory in all these games. If Houston even looks good, suddenly it's like, oh, they really do belong because that's the team that won the whole conference last year, or in the conference title game last year. I guess they lost to Kansas State, but you feel me, right? All right, so TCU is the second most fun. The first most fun, though, is UT Austin. And there's a number of reasons around this. First of all, if you're a Southwest Conference person, you remember feeling shut off by, frankly, UT Austin and Texas A&M when the Southwest Conference dissolved and several schools went to the Big 12, right? Like, that was a thing. That was impactful. That was a problem. You also probably have had this coffee table or water cooler bar with your buddies argument for a long time because UT Austin's a very big school with a bunch of alumni, whatever. about what would happen in a theoretical matchup. UT Austin's a school that always pulls in the 5-star recruits out of the city of Houston and then doesn't do a whole heck of a lot with them for the last dozen years. So like those kinds of things are all adding into this. I also think it's worth pointing out that UT Austin is like favored to win the conference in almost every Vegas poll next season. So theoretically, every Vegas odds next season. So theoretically, like they're going to be good. Good opponent to like test yourself against. It's also the one time Houston gets to play these guys in conference. And it's also bluntly the kind of thing UT Austin chokes. They just have for the last 12 years, 13 years since that national championship game. Colt McCoy got hurt. They have not been the same program with like one major bowl win, I guess. But moreover, with all the funding and 5-stars and even stealing Houston's own coach and Tom Herman, what have they done? Right? Like honestly. And so this is a chance for Houston to show that, like, hey, they're in the same arena as all these other blue bloods across Southwest and Texas, and I guess the SEC as Texas is moving into the SEC. But also, it's this moment where, for the one and only time, you get to see Houston play Texas in a non-theoretical sense. And I think that's really, really important and impactful. And frankly, the kind of thing that the winner will be talking trash about at all of your, picnics back and forth with fans of different color t-shirts for a long time, because you just don't know when the next time will happen. I would argue that's enough and reason in and of itself to buy the whole package. But there's reasons to buy each and every game. So you might as well buy all 7 games in the season ticket package. If you disagree, or if you have other reasons that I forgot, talk to me at Painsworth512. That's PAINSWRTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, all of your social media handles. I'll be happy to talk all things Houston Cougar football, moving to the Big 12, basketball as well. Baseball team is hot right now. They're gonna have at least a segment on Friday's show. They're doing pretty well right now. I mean, you could talk about Corey Julks and the Astros, what are the Rockets going to do in the draft? Could the Rockets land Jarris Walker in the draft? That'd be fun. We can talk about the Texans and should they take Tank Dell, whatever you want to talk about. Find me at Painsworth512. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Cougs Day and making us your first listen, frankly. For a second listen, I'm going to recommend Locked On Big 12 because we talked about the Big 12 all day long. And if you like Big 12 talk this much, there's a whole show just on the Big 12 for you. So go check that one out. Thank you all so much for listening to Locked On Cougs. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.